Uh, okay, before to begin, I would like to take advantage and thank very much Rotary Japan for the treat I've been receiving during these years, and in particular, I would like to thank Mr. Elio and Mr. Alessandro from Italy, Treviso Rotary Club and Milan Rotary Club, but particularly I would like to thank my counselor Fujimaru-san and my club Chofu Murasaki. So now I'm gonna talk a little bit about my work of the last 6 months. So yeah, I was interested as an aid worker. I was interested in development and the relation between donors and recipients dynamics. Actually, we every day we can see how the dynamics between donors and recipients are really challenging. Just a few days ago, I was reading that Save the Children, which is one of the most prominent NGOs working worldwide, has been chased by Pakistani government, and within 15 days, all of Save the Children staff has to leave the country. So yeah, every day we realize how this nexus comes to be very, very ultimate. So to do that, I decided to explore foreign aid and the Millennium Development Goal, which is nothing like that the last strategy adopted by the UN in 2000, and which deadline actually is due this year. The MDGs form a sort of a blueprint agreed by all the world's country and all the world's, let's say, leading aid agencies with the objective of fighting poverty and reducing, eliminating actually the extreme poverty. So actually I'm very happy that I've been preceded by Sana, which gave us a little bit of a picture of how complex is the situation, the scenario now in Burma, and how the intervention of the international community becomes sort of ultimate in Myanmar. So after 15 years since the beginning of the Millennium Development Goal strategy, it is now time to make a balance of these years of efforts. And what we can say now at 6 months to the deadline is that this strategy hasn't been really entirely successful. Yeah, so this is actually a little bit a very, very, very rough summary of what is the MDG strategy. So there are 8 goals for reducing poverty and eliminating extreme poverty. So in order to answer my question, would be like how and why this strategy sort of failed or wasn't really successful. I tried to narrow down my research to a very specific goal among the 8 goals, and I wanted to focus in one specific country, which is actually Myanmar again. So I wanted to explore how goal number 5 was not properly implemented and was not actually matched so far. And so goal number 5 is about family planning, is about the universal access to family planning. I wanted to give you the definition of the WHO of family planning. So family planning, according to the WHO, is allows individuals and couples to anticipate and attain their desired number of children and the spacing and timing of their births. It is achieved through use of contraceptive methods and the treatment of involuntary infertility. And now comes the substantial part. So a woman, according to WHO, a woman's ability to space and limit her pregnancies has a direct impact on her health and on her well-being, as well as on the outcome of each pregnancy, because it is also a matter of health. Family planning. I decided to take family planning for several reasons as a case study, but here it suffices to say that this is a very sensitive topic for Myanmar due to cultural and political features of the country. Secondly, Myanmar health system is one of the weakest in Asian region and generally in worldwide. Here we can say how I sort of try to narrow my question in order to facilitate my research, actually. I wanted to come to the methodology a little bit. So methodology. I decided to use triangulation, which look like a sort of a weird term, but is nothing like that, utilizing three different sources. So first I analyzed the existing data, taking confronting basically the government of Myanmar data, in particular the Ministry of Health data, then UN data and international NGO and independent research institutes data. And here I found the first big, let's say, challenge about the reliability of data in Myanmar. So if we think just of one of the most basic data, like population, the number of population. So we know that, for instance, Japan has like 127 million inhabitants. So about Myanmar, there is a discrepancy of 10 to 12 million inhabitants. So on the one hand, there is the government saying that the population reached up to 60 million people. Other sources like World Bank talk about 48 to 50 million. And according to the last census, after just more than 30 years, which was published last year, we now know that the population is around 51 million. Plus, as Sana was saying before, 1.5 to 2 million people maybe which have not been addressed by the census actually. So this is very tricky. This data is very emblematic. So we can think about if the population is data are so uncertain. So all the other kind of data about health are really difficult to know. So the second source was 19 interviews I conducted when I was actually working in Myanmar. I tried to reach government officers, international NGO officers, and even some business owner. Actually, among them there was a Rotarian, a Myanmar Rotarian of the new Yangon Rotary Club, which was very useful for me to have him like as a link. So finally, I also utilized a participatory observation, being myself working there for a few months with an NGO. I try to sort of concentrate my work in some critical points. So first, I wanted to address the complexity of the health structure. So health system in Myanmar is composed by different forms of of health. So we have like the public health, private health, which link with military health and ethnic groups run health, or INGO run health. So non-government organizations, facilities, let's say. So all those kind of health systems, they do not communicate to each other, and they do not connect. So it is really difficult to address them thoroughly. So other issue is about trust. So trust is a big issue in Myanmar, and it is very difficult to address. Trust and mistrust originates from legacy, as Sana said, of like about 60 actually years of military rule, and before a devastating colonial rule. Now this trust issue influences the relations between NGOs and with NGOs and government, between government and minorities, and between NGOs themselves. So we have to think that in Myanmar there are like more than 300 projects going on, and there are, so from $500 million in 2010 we came to like $2 billion of aid. So there is even an issue of how the government can tackle all this big amount of money and agencies. It was really difficult for me to find the right way to approach the problem, because as a background, the Myanmar situation was really complex. So I think I should come to the conclusion, because it's 3 minutes. So so we have discussed about how which could be the reason of the failure of these development goals. So I think the first thing to address is, as we say, data. So and I think to address that, as soon as the government realized that data are important not just for the donor and for the international NGO, but just for the government itself to manage better their people, their community, so the process will be more sort of a natural. And secondly, there is a question of tailoring priorities. So in order to do that, what I was elaborating, even with my NGO co-worker, was that so it will be good to make the recipient government, the recipient communities, the real protagonist of the change, so the real protagonist of the development process, making them sort of the lead decision maker. So providing them just with the critical skills to make decisions, and once they get the critical decision, they can decide like autonomously. And so I think this was the main focus of my research. Thank you. I think there are some questions.
Arigatou gozaimasu, Luca. We are delighted to receive your questions or reflections. So before we go for coffee,
Hi, Luca.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. My question was how your research and Sana's research, both, you said there was a lack of data, and then Sana says that certain groups within Myanmar, the government didn't even collect their data. So, my question actually is, how does an NGO like VSO work with the real marginalized people if the government itself doesn't even recognize some of the marginalized people? So in terms of healthcare, can NGOs provide healthcare for the people that the government doesn't recognize? Whose responsibility does it?
Yeah, actually, yeah, thank you for the really interesting question. Actually, as an NGO, mostly an NGO like new in the country, you have to make some choices. So if you really want to stay there, to settle in a new country like Myanmar, addressing like maybe the Rohingya population as a priority, let's say, is not really a good strategy. We have to strategize. I mean, it's not business, it's development, but still, we have to, start with the right foot. I mean, so of course, it's very difficult to address the Rohingya problem, and say there are many more minorities in Myanmar suffering and living in poor conditions. There are many ways, I mean, to address health, the health weaknesses. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. But I do agree what you are saying. Yeah.
Yeah, any questions? Oh.
Thank you. I think the world community has quite recently come to aware of the Rohingya issues, and now they started to give pressures on the Myanmar government as well as neighboring country to accept several of the refugees. And Myanmar is now in a situation they badly need support, financial support, variety of help from all over the world. And so do you think that world community can give some effective pressure using the leverage of providing support the Myanmar government to press to address the Rohingya issues?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your question. Yes, I do think that Rohingya issue have to be addressed as soon as possible, and I actually see some light on it. I mean, since till 2 years ago, international NGOs weren't allowed to enter the Arakan state, which is where Rohingya are living. Médecins Sans Frontières, Save the Children were asked to leave actually Arakan state. Now things are different. Now some sort of a deal has been agreed between the central government and the local government of Arakan state and international NGOs. So I think, something is moving, and this is also, of course, thanks to the international community pressure. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Luca.